The grand halls of the Varelian palace shimmered with soft blue light. Every wall glowed faintly, alive with energy from crystals mined on distant moons. Soldiers in shining silver armor stood like statues, their faces cold and unreadable. They were perfect, flawless, and completely emotionless, and just like the people they served. And among them stood a single human. Captain Elias Ward, a soldier from Earth, didn't fit in at all. His armor was simpler, scratched from years of use. His hair was messy, his jaw rough with stubble. The Varelian guards often looked at him with quiet disapproval, as if a fragile creature had wandered into their perfect world. But he didn't care. He had a job to do. He was the personal guard of Queen Serath, ruler of the Varelian Empire. How a human earned that position was still a mystery to most of the court. Some said it was politics. Others whispered that the queen was testing how far she could trust the unpredictable species of Earth. But the truth was known only to her, and to him. Elias had saved her life once. It was 2 years ago, during a riot on the colony moon of Terrene 4. Rebels had stormed the Queen's shuttle, blasters blazing. Her guards froze, waiting for orders, following logic instead of instinct. But Elias didn't wait. He ran through the fire, tackled her down, and covered her with his body as explosions tore through the landing pad. When the smoke cleared, he was bleeding, but she was alive. Since that day, she had requested him personally as her royal protector. Everywhere she went, he followed. Silent, respectful, and alert, the Queen rarely spoke to anyone, yet sometimes, in quiet moments, she spoke to him. One evening, as the twin suns of Varelia sat beyond the palace walls, the Queen had asked him, "Why did you protect me that day, Captain? Your duty did not require such a risk." Elias had thought for a moment before answering, "Because it was right, Your Majesty. I didn't think. I just acted." She had looked at him with those bright silver eyes, studying him as if he were something strange, something she couldn't understand. "Humans," she murmured softly. "You always act from the heart, not from logic." He had smiled faintly. Maybe that's why we survive. That small moment had stayed with her. And though she never said it aloud, the Queen began to trust him in a way she trusted no one else. But not everyone approved. Many nobles whispered behind her back. They called him the pet human. They said his kind were reckless, violent, and emotional. They warned the Queen that emotions were dangerous for a ruler of her kind. Yet when Elias stood by her side during councils or ceremonies, she always seemed calmer, stronger. Maybe because, deep down, he reminded her of something she had long forgotten. That leadership was not only about logic, but also about courage and care. Elias, on the other hand, never let those thoughts distract him. He had seen enough battles to know that trust was fragile. His duty was simple: protect her no matter the cost. Still, sometimes, when he looked at her standing tall in her silver robes, her crown shimmering like liquid light, he couldn't help but feel a quiet awe. She was beautiful, yes, but not in a human way. Her beauty was like the calm before a storm, distant, untouchable. And yet sometimes when their eyes met, he thought he saw something soft behind her calm mask. Something like curiosity, or maybe even loneliness. The court halls were cold places full of ceremony and silence. But when Elias walked behind her, the silence didn't feel so heavy. He didn't realize that his presence, his simple, human warmth, had become her comfort. Then came the day that would change everything. Royal gathering was planned, a meeting of the Varelian Empire's most powerful allies. Ambassadors, generals, and lords from across the stars would attend. It was meant to show peace and unity. Elias prepared like always, checking every guard, every entrance, every weapon. His instincts, sharpened by years of combat, told him something was off. The air felt too tense, the security too perfect. He had seen enough ambushes to recognize the quiet before danger, but he said nothing. His orders were to protect and observe. That night, as the Queen stood upon her throne and the guests bowed before her, Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. Something unseen moved among the crowd. He gripped the handle of his plasma rifle and took a silent breath. He didn't know it yet, but within the next few minutes, everything he believed about duty, about loyalty, about himself, and was going to be tested in the most painful, beautiful way possible. The royal gathering had begun. Inside the grand crystal hall, music echoed like a slow heartbeat. Floating lanterns lit the air with soft white light, and guests from 100 worlds stood in quiet admiration of Queen Sereth's grace. Her silver robe shimmered with every movement, her expression calm, her posture perfect. Captain Elias Ward stood just a few steps behind her throne, his hand resting on the side of his weapon. To anyone watching, he looked calm, but inside, every instinct screamed, something was wrong. He scanned the hall carefully, the crowd of tall, elegant Varelians, the alien ambassadors in their jeweled uniforms, the guards at every door. Everything looked right, but it felt wrong. The air was heavy, too still, as if the room itself was holding its breath. When the Queen began her speech, his eyes never left her. Her voice was soft but powerful, echoing through the chamber like a song. "My people," she said, "today we welcome our brothers and sisters from across the stars. Together we build peace, together we rise." The crowd applauded, but Elias noticed one thing. Near the back of the hall, a small movement. A hand trembling slightly, a shadow among the lights, then he saw it. A thin metallic dart, almost invisible, shot through the air. Fast, silent, deadly. It was aimed straight at the Queen's neck. Without thinking, Elias moved. Time seemed to slow. His training, his instincts, everything took over. He leaped forward, pushing the Queen aside. The dart struck his shoulder, sinking deep into his flesh. The pain was instant and sharp, like fire under his skin. He fell to one knee, breathing hard. The Queen turned, her eyes wide in shock. "Elias!" she cried. The hall gasped. No one had ever heard her shout before, not even in war. The guards rushed forward too late. The attacker was already gone, swallowed by the panicked crowd. The nobles screamed and scattered. Chaos filled the once silent hall. Elias could feel the poison spreading through his veins, burning like acid. He tried to pull the dart out, but his arm wouldn't obey. His vision blurred. "Stay still," the Queen said, kneeling beside him. Her silver hand pressed against the wound, glowing with faint light. But her healing energy, the ancient gift of her kind, did nothing. The poison was too strong, too strange. Her voice shook. "Get the medics now." The guards carried him away as his vision faded. His last sight was her face, normally so calm and perfect, now filled with fear. Real fear. He had never seen her like that before. When Elias opened his eyes again, the light above him was dim and blue. The sound of machines surrounded him, the soft beeping of monitors, the hiss of air tubes. He tried to move, but pain shot through every nerve. A medic's voice echoed faintly. "The poison is spreading faster than expected. It's not Varelian design, it's human engineered. It's meant to kill humans." Then another voice, softer, familiar. "Keep him alive, Queen Sereth." She stood beside his bed, her elegant face pale. Her silver eyes watched the rise and fall of his chest as if willing him to keep breathing. The doctors bowed and left the room, leaving her alone with him. Elias tried to speak, but his throat felt dry as dust. "Your Majesty," he whispered. She leaned closer. "Don't talk. Save your strength." He gave a weak smile. "Didn't think they'd use poison." Her voice broke slightly. "You were not the target." "I was." He looked at her for a long time, even as his vision dimmed again. "Doesn't matter. You're safe." Her lips trembled, the first crack in her royal mask. "Why do you care so much?" He gave a slow, painful laugh. "Because it's what we humans do. We protect, even when it hurts." Tears glimmered in her silver eyes, something no one in her species had shown in centuries. She pressed her hand over his heart, her voice a whisper. "Do not die, Elias Ward, I command it." He wanted to answer, but darkness took him again. Outside the healing chamber, the palace was in turmoil. The nobles demanded explanations. The generals wanted war, but the Queen said nothing. She stayed beside the human who had saved her, a fragile, foolish creature who didn't think before jumping in front of death. A creature who bled and suffered for her without hesitation. For the first time in her long reign, Queen Sereth felt something she could not understand. Fear not for her empire, but for a single human life. The palace was silent. Too silent. Outside the healing chamber, guards stood like statues, their faces tense. The halls that once echoed with soft music were now heavy with fear. Rumors spread through the empire. The Queen had cried. The human protector was dying. Inside, Elias Ward lay on a white bed surrounded by glowing medical machines. His breathing was slow, uneven. The poison had turned the veins in his arm black, crawling up toward his chest like spreading shadows. The Varelian healers worked day and night. Their long silver hands moved quickly, their glowing tools humming with strange energy. But their faces told the truth. Nothing was working. "This toxin is beyond our medicine," one of them whispered. "It's made for human blood. We can't break it down." Queen Serath stood at the foot of the bed, her expression unreadable but her eyes full of pain. She had not left his side since the attack. Her advisors begged her to rest, but she ignored them all. She watched the human, the man who had once stood like a wall between her and death, now lying helpless and cold. His face, once full of quiet confidence, was pale and weak. She reached out and gently took his hand. It felt rough and warm, so different from the smooth touch of her kind. "You foolish human," she whispered. "You were supposed to protect me, not destroy yourself." For the first time in her long reign, Serath didn't feel like a queen. She felt powerless. She had ruled 1,000 years. She had survived wars, betrayals, and assassins. She had seen galaxies burn and rebuild. Yet now, one dying human made her feel something she couldn't control. Fear. She closed her eyes. In her mind, she remembered his voice. "Because it was right, Your Majesty. I didn't think. I just acted. That was Elias. That was humanity. Reckless, emotional, alive. Hours passed. Days, maybe. Time had no meaning in that quiet chamber. The queen refused to attend meetings or speak to anyone. Her ministers whispered that grief had broken her mind. But she didn't care. One night, when the healers had gone, she sat alone beside him. The machines beeped softly. His heartbeat was faint, but still there. She spoke quietly, as if afraid to break the silence. "Do you know, Captain, that I have seen countless worlds? I have spoken to 1,000 species. Yet none of them ever looked at me the way you did. Not as a ruler, not as a symbol, but as a person." Her fingers tightened around his hand. "You treated me like someone worth saving. And now I would give everything to return that gift." For a moment she thought she saw his lips move. His eyelids fluttered. Then weakly he whispered, "Your Majesty?" Her heart leaped. "I am here," she said quickly, leaning closer. He looked at her with hazy eyes, his breath shallow. "You should leave. Dangerous. For you." She shook her head firmly. "I am not leaving you." "Why?" he asked weakly. Serath hesitated. No one had ever dared ask her that. Her voice trembled when she answered, "Because I owe you my life. And because—" She stopped, her throat tightening. "Because I cannot lose you." Elias blinked slowly. He wanted to speak again, but the poison surged through him and his eyes rolled back. The monitor screamed with warning tones. The queen called for the healers, her calm breaking. "Save him. Do something," she shouted. Her voice, usually cold and regal, cracked with emotion. But the chief healer lowered his eyes. "We have tried everything, my queen. His body rejects our treatments. Only a human cure could save him, and there is none within reach." Serath felt her knees weaken. For a second she could hardly breathe. "Then find one," she said quietly. "Search every world, every ship. I will not let him die." They bowed, but in their eyes she saw no hope. Later that night, when everyone had gone, Serath stood beside him again. The room glowed softly, the stars shining through the glass wall. Elias lay still, his chest rising slowly with each painful breath. She reached out and brushed his hair from his forehead, her touch gentle. "You risked everything for me," she whispered. "Even when I never asked you to." Her voice trembled. "Your people, they feel so deeply. You fight for love, for friendship, for what is right. Not because you are ordered, but because your heart tells you to. That is what makes you human." A tear rolled down her silver cheek and fell onto his hand, shining like liquid light. At that moment she made a silent vow, and if he lived, she would find a way to bridge the distance between their worlds, between reason and emotion, between queen and soldier. She would not let his sacrifice be forgotten. As the stars glowed softly above, she whispered to him one last time, "Rest, Elias Ward. Rest until I find a way to bring you back." And for the first time in her long life, the immortal queen prayed, not to gods, but to the stubborn, burning hope that lived only in human hearts. The days passed like fading light. Inside the palace, everything had changed. The queen no longer smiled. The laughter that once filled the gardens had vanished. Every morning she visited the healing chamber, and every night she left with the same silent grief in her eyes. Elias Ward was still alive, but barely. His heartbeat was weak, his body cold. The poison ran deep in his veins, and no medicine worked. The healers whispered among themselves, afraid to say the truth, that the human would not last much longer. But Queen Sarath refused to accept it. She had seen countless soldiers die in war, yet this one death, his death, felt unbearable. She had ruled for centuries with logic, not emotion, but now her heart led her where reason would not. She began searching for a cure. Every laboratory, every scientist, every secret healer in her empire was summoned. Some offered strange ideas and blood replacements, energy transfusions, rare medicines, but nothing helped. Human blood and Varelian energy were too different. The poison was crafted for human biology. Still, she did not stop. She searched ancient records, forgotten scrolls, and forbidden archives that hadn't been touched in 1,000 years. One night, she stood alone in the royal library, surrounded by holograms of old texts. The blue light flickered over her pale face as she whispered, "There must be a way," and then she found it. In an ancient record older than the empire itself, she discovered something called the life bond, a ritual that allowed two living beings to share their essence. It was said that when two souls merged, their life energies could heal what medicine could not. But there was a reason it had been forgotten. The bond was dangerous. It worked only between equals, two beings who trusted one another completely, and if the energy failed to balance, both could die. Sarath stood there for a long moment, her hands trembling. Logic told her it was madness. No ruler should risk her life for one soldier. No queen should perform an ancient ritual with a human. But then she remembered his words, the way he had smiled weakly, even as poison burned through him. "Because it was right, Your Majesty. I didn't think. I just acted." She closed the book slowly, whispering to herself, "Then I will do the same." When her advisors heard of her decision, they were horrified. "This is not possible." "Your Majesty," said General Kale, her oldest commander, "the bond was forbidden for a reason. You could destroy yourself, and for what? A human life." She looked at him with cold fire in her eyes. "That human saved your queen. Do you think I will abandon him like a broken weapon?" The room fell silent. No one dared speak again. The council begged her to reconsider. The healers warned that the ritual might merge her soul with his, that she could lose part of herself forever, but she had already decided. That night she entered the healing chamber alone. Elias lay still, pale as moonlight. The machines hummed softly, trying to keep his fading heart alive. She walked to his bedside and placed a hand gently over his chest. "Forgive me, Elias," she whispered. "You would do the same for me." Her fingers glowed with silver light. Slowly she began the ancient chant, the words of bonding, old and powerful. The air shimmered. The room filled with energy, red and silver intertwining like fire and wind. Her own heart pounded. She could feel his pain, his memories, flashes of earth, of blue skies and laughter, of battlefields and courage. He had lost so much, yet still he protected others. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered the final vow. "From my heart to yours, from my breath to yours, I give life." A burst of light filled the room. The machine sparked. The walls shook. Her body trembled as part of her life force poured into him. The pain was unbearable, fire spreading through her veins. But she didn't stop. When it was over, she collapsed beside him, breathing hard. The healers rushed in, shouting in panic, but she raised a weak hand. "Do not touch him," she said softly. "Let the bond settle." Her skin was pale, her strength fading, yet she smiled faintly when she saw color returning to his face. For the first time in days, his heart monitor beeped steadily. His breathing grew stronger. The healers bowed their heads in awe. "He's stabilizing," one whispered. Sarath closed her eyes, whispering through her exhaustion. Then it worked. That night, as she rested beside his bed, her light dimmed but her heart calm. She thought about what she had done. No queen of Varelia had ever shared her life with another being, especially not a human. But she didn't regret it, because when she looked at him sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, she realized something simple and true. He had saved her life once. Now she had returned the gift. And maybe, just maybe, their two worlds were not as far apart as everyone believed. Soft light filled the healing chamber. The night sky outside was dark and calm, with two moons shining over the Silver City. The palace was quiet, holding its breath as if waiting for a miracle. And then, it happened. Captain Elias Ward opened his eyes. At first, everything was blurry. The ceiling lights, the faint hum of machines, the weight in his chest. His body felt different, lighter and heavier at the same time. He blinked slowly, his throat dry, his breath uneven. He was alive. He turned his head slightly and saw Queen Sarath sitting beside him, her hand resting on his arm. Her eyes were closed, her face pale with exhaustion. For a moment he thought she was asleep, but then her lips moved, whispering softly, "You came back." His voice came out rough. "What happened?" She opened her eyes, and there was warmth in them, a light he had never seen before. "You were dying," she said softly. "So I brought you back." He frowned weakly. "How?" For a moment she was silent. Then she answered, "I gave you part of my life." Elias stared at her, confused. "Your life?" She nodded slowly. "Our healers could not cure you, so I performed the ancient bond. My energy now flows in your veins." He struggled to sit up, but pain shot through his body. The queen reached out quickly, pressing her hand gently to his chest. "Don't move yet. Your body is still learning to hold my energy." He looked at her, really looked. Her skin, once glowing silver, was dimmer now. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes. She looked human, fragile. "You shouldn't have done that," he whispered. Her lips curved into a tired smile. "You would have done the same." He laughed softly, though his voice cracked. "Yes, but I'm reckless." "You're a queen." She tilted her head, her voice quiet but firm. And what is a queen without her protector? For a while neither spoke. Only the gentle rhythm of the machines filled the silence. Then Elias said softly, "You saved me, Sarath." It was the first time he had spoken her name without a title. It slipped out naturally, like a truth he couldn't hide anymore. Her silver eyes flickered with emotion, but she didn't correct him. "And you saved me first," she whispered. "Now we are even." Days passed and Elias grew stronger. But something was different. When he touched his chest, he could feel a faint warmth under his skin, a silver glow like quiet fire. Sometimes he heard her voice in his thoughts, gentle and distant, as if their souls had become linked. Once, while she helped him stand, he said quietly, "I can feel you, even when you're not here." She looked at him calmly. "That is the bond. Our life energies are connected now. If you feel pain, I will know. If you feel peace, I will feel it too." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll try to stay peaceful." Her gaze softened. "Do that. It will help us both." But peace was not what waited outside. When word of the life bond spread through the empire, the nobles were furious. They called it blasphemy, a sacred ritual shared with a human. They said the queen had broken the purity of her rule. The council demanded answers. "This bond must be undone," shouted one noble. "It threatens our entire lineage." But the queen's voice was steady and cold. "You speak of lineage while a man who bled for your queen lies recovering in my palace. Do you not see the hypocrisy?" The hall fell silent. None dared to argue. Still, the whispers grew louder. The people talked. The empire trembled. Through all of it, Elias remained quiet. He trained his body again, learning to walk, to breathe without pain. But in every quiet moment he thought of her, the woman who gave up part of her soul for him. One evening he found her alone in the palace garden. The air shimmered with starlight, and the trees glowed faintly with silver leaves. She looked at him and smiled gently. "You are walking again," he nodded. "Because of you." They stood in silence for a long time. Then he said softly, "You risked your life for me." "But why?" Her voice was low, trembling slightly. "Because you reminded me what life truly means. For centuries I ruled with cold reason. I forgot what it felt like to feel. You gave that back to me." He looked at her, the queen who once seemed untouchable, and saw not power but heart. Slowly he reached out and took her hand. "Then maybe we both saved each other." She didn't pull away. For a long moment they stood beneath the stars. Two souls bound by something neither of their worlds could explain. And somewhere deep inside both of them, the bond pulsed softly, not as pain, but as peace. The golden towers of the alien capital shone under the twin suns. But inside the palace, a quiet storm was brewing. The bond between Queen Serath and Captain Elias Ward had become the talk of every world in the Empire. Some called it beautiful. Most called it a disgrace. The Council of Elders gathered in the Hall of Voices, a vast chamber of glowing crystals and floating thrones. Their faces were cold, their silver eyes sharp as blades. Queen Serath sat upon her throne, calm but unreadable, while Elias stood behind her, silent and steady like a shadow carved from stone. One elder leaned forward. "Your Majesty, we warned you. A life bond with a human is not permitted. It taints the royal line. It breaks the ancient law." Serath's voice was calm. "He saved my life. The bond saved his. This law you speak of, is it above honor?" "Honor?" Another hissed. "You have brought shame. The people whisper, the priests refuse to bless your reign. The bond must be broken." Elias's fist tightened, but he said nothing. Serath's tone grew colder. "To break the bond is to kill him." "So be it," an elder replied. "Better one human die than our queen lose her purity." The words struck the chamber like thunder. Elias stepped forward then, unable to hold back. "If my death restores your peace, then fine. But remember this, your queen would be dead if not for me, and your laws would have died with her." Gasps filled the hall. No one had ever spoken to the council like that. But the queen raised her hand before the guards could move. "Enough," she said softly. Her gaze was steady, her voice filled with quiet fire. "You forget who I am. I do not rule to please the frightened. I rule to protect the living." Then she rose from her throne, her silver cloak shimmering with light. "If any among you believes this bond weakens me, come and test your strength against mine." No one moved. The council fell silent, their courage fading beneath her gaze. That night, the queen returned to her private chamber, weary and heavy-hearted. Elias followed quietly, keeping a respectful distance. When the doors closed, the mask of royalty fell away and she sank to her knees beside the window. "I'm losing them," she whispered. "My people." "My council. All because of this bond." Elias stepped forward. "You are not losing them. They're afraid. Fear makes fools out of the wise." She turned her head slowly toward him. "You speak as if you understand rule." He gave a small, tired smile. "No, but I understand people. And I know that real strength is not in blood or crown. It's in heart." For a moment, she just looked at him. This human soldier who spoke with no title, no fear. Then her eyes softened and she whispered, "You always find the right words." He knelt beside her. "Because I see the truth. You care more than they ever will. That's what makes you a queen." Her hand trembled as it reached for his. "You should not speak so freely with your queen," she said with a faint smile. He looked into her silver eyes. "Then maybe I'm not speaking to a queen tonight. Maybe I'm just speaking to Serath." Silence filled the room, soft, heavy, and warm. Outside, the stars burned like tiny fires in the dark. For a brief moment, she rested her forehead against his shoulder. "Elias," she whispered, her voice breaking. "What have we done to deserve this pain?" He answered gently, "We cared. That's all. And sometimes, caring costs everything." The next morning, the storm finally broke. Assassins entered the palace, not from the enemy planets, but from within her own court. Betrayal born from fear and pride. Elias woke to the sound of alarm bells. Without hesitation, he grabbed his weapon and ran. He reached the throne room just as 3 cloaked figures charged toward Serath. One of them drew a curved blade, its edge glowing green, the same poison used before. Elias didn't think. He moved like lightning, his instincts screaming. The bond between him and Serath pulsed violently in his chest. Her fear, her pain, her shock. He felt it all. He fired his plasma rifle, struck down one attacker, then another. But the third reached too close. The blade slashed across his arm, burning deep. Serath cried out, her own arm flaring with the same pain, the bond linking their wounds. Together they fought, she with her energy shield, he with his rifle. When it was over, 3 assassins lay dead, and the room smelled of smoke and betrayal. Elias dropped to his knees, bleeding heavily. Serath rushed to him, tears streaking her silver cheeks. "You're hurt again for me." He smiled weakly. "You should stop standing near poisoned weapons." Despite the chaos, she laughed, a broken, trembling laugh. Then she pressed her hands to his wound. her light flowing into him once more. "You keep saving me," she whispered. "But one day I will save you." He looked at her through the blur of pain and smiled faintly. "You already have." That night, as the fires were put out and the palace restored, a new realization grew within the queen's heart. The council had betrayed her. The nobles had tried to kill her, but the one who truly stood for her and was not of her world. And the next dawn, she made a decision that would shake both their worlds forever. The sun rose slowly over the shining city of Althera, painting the sky in gold and violet. But inside the palace, the air was heavy with silence and waiting. For days, the empire had been shaken, the council in chaos, the nobles divided, and the queen's bond with the human soldier whispered about in every street and corridor. But this morning, everything would change. Queen Serath stood before the great balcony of the palace, dressed not in her royal armor but in a simple silver robe. Her crown was gone, her long hair falling freely behind her. Her eyes, calm yet glowing with resolve, looked down upon the sea of her people. Thousands of aliens had gathered below, murmuring, waiting to hear the words that would decide their future. And behind her stood Captain Elias Ward, dressed in clean uniform, his arm still bandaged from the recent battle. He didn't know what the queen planned. She hadn't told him, but he could feel it through the bond pulsing between them. Something powerful was coming. When the trumpet sounded, silence fell over the crowd. The queen stepped forward, her voice ringing clear and strong. "My people," she began, "you have known me as your ruler, your protector, and your blood-bonded queen. But today I speak to you not as your monarch, but as a woman who has seen the truth of two hearts." Whispers rippled through the crowd. She continued, "When I was struck by a poisoned arrow, it was not one of our kind who saved me. It was a human, a soldier from a far world. He stood between me and death, and when he fell, I could not let him die. I shared my life with him, and in doing so I discovered what no crown could teach me. Compassion without boundary, courage without pride." Her voice trembled slightly, but she kept speaking, stronger with each word. "Many of you say the bond between us is wrong, that it defies our law. But tell me, what is law without heart? What is purity without mercy?" The crowd murmured again, not in anger this time, but confusion and awe. Serath turned and looked at Elias. Her silver eyes softened, shining like liquid stars. "Elias Ward," she said, her voice lowering, "you have risked your life for me not once but twice. You have faced my enemies, my people, and even death itself, and still you stand here beside me." Elias's throat tightened. "I'd do it again," he said quietly. She smiled faintly, a smile that carried warmth and sorrow both. "I know, and that is why before all who watch this day I make a choice." The crowd leaned forward. Even the wind seemed to pause. Serath turned back to her people and raised her hand. "From this day forward, the bond between our kinds shall no longer be seen as forbidden. The barrier between human and Altherian is broken. Because love—" She turned her gaze again to Elias, her voice soft but powerful. "Love is not bound by species or blood." Then she stepped closer to him. The entire empire held its breath. "Elias Ward," she said, her voice trembling now. "You saved your queen, shared her pain, her strength, and her soul. I ask you now not as your ruler, but as the woman whose heart you've awakened." She knelt before him, a queen kneeling before a soldier. Gasps filled the air. "Will you stand by my side, not as my guard, but as my partner?" "As my husband?" For a moment, Elias could not move. His chest felt tight, his heart pounding. He had fought wars, faced death, and seen galaxies burn, but nothing had ever struck him like this. He reached out, gently lifting her hand. "Serath," he said softly, "you don't need to kneel to anyone, least of all to me." She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "Then stand with me." He smiled, tears glistening in his eyes. "Always." The crowd erupted, not in anger, but in stunned, rising cheer. The sound of 1,000 voices filled the air, echoing across the sky. For the first time in history, a human and an Altherian stood hand in hand before the Empire, their bond glowing faintly between them like a ribbon of light. Neither magic nor science, but something deeper. That night after the ceremony, they stood on the palace balcony again. The stars above burned bright, reflecting in their eyes. Elias looked at her and said quietly, You changed your world today. She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. No, we did. For a moment, they stood in silence. Two souls from different worlds, united not by command or fate, but by choice. Then Sarath whispered, "Do you ever regret it? Saving me that day?" He looked out at the stars, not for a single heartbeat, and somewhere deep inside them, the bond pulsed once more, warm and calm, no longer a burden, but a promise. A promise that no matter how far apart their worlds were, their hearts would always find each other.